දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, a stitch in time. The GMOA says time to act now, and PHI says subcluster out of control, while the epidemiology unit says all signs point to cluster level only.
There is no evidence that the community transmission is established in our country.
Ground zero. Gampaha gets a day of free movement for stocking up, while more government departments close up shop. The $400 million question. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrives tomorrow for government talks as question hangs over topic of discussion. COVID ready. The Colombo Stock Exchange and some market intermediaries switched to remote operations due to COVID-19 curfews. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Monday, the 26th of October, 2020.
Nava Sunlight Sakura. Then Dikukal Pavatina Sakura Mal Suandin.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhamnik Ekanaka. Let's start with your local stories. Now, Sri Lanka's second high-powered visit in just months happens tomorrow with the arrival of US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo following his talks with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi. Pompeo will hold talks with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his counterpart Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena during his one-day visit. However, a large question mark remains in the public domain, especially whether discussions would center on the resurrection of the controversial Millennium Challenge Compact Agreement, which has long been touted by the US as a less harmful replacement to Chinese Development Corporation in Sri Lanka.
Hot on the heels of a high-powered Chinese delegation that visited the country on the 10th of this month, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrives in the country tomorrow. He is currently in India, meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, discussing ways to advance the US-India Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership. In Colombo, Secretary Pompeo will meet with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena before jetting off on the next leg of his tour in the Maldives. However, the $400 million question on the minds of the majority of Sri Lankans these days is whether the Millennium Challenge Compact will take center stage during the discussions tomorrow. It remains no secret that there is no love lost between the Sri Lankan public and the idea of the MCC agreement, inclusive of the rather opaque acquisition and cross-servicing as well as status of forces agreements that were expected to piggyback on it. Their suspicions were further heightened last year, following attempts by the previous government to sign it and rush it through before the presidential elections. Last week, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for South and Central Asian Affairs, Dean Thompson, revealed at a media conference ahead of the visit that discussions would focus on emphasizing US commitment to a strong, independent and democratic Sri Lanka, shared goals of sustainable economic development and a free and open Indo-Pacific. Thompson also stated that the US encourages Sri Lanka to review the options of its offer of transparent and sustainable economic development, in contrast to discriminatory and opaque practices, a veiled comparison between China's Belt and Road Initiative and its own Millennium Challenge Compact. He added that the United States urges Sri Lanka to make difficult but necessary decisions to secure its economic independence for long-term prosperity and expressed readiness to partner with Sri Lanka for its economic development and growth. When asked to comment on Sri Lanka's Chinese connection, Thompson stated that the US will be looking to discussing ways to change Sri Lanka's course towards a more positive trajectory, where Sri Lanka is headed, and ways to strengthen human rights, rule of law and democracy in the country. The next day, China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian responded to Thompson's comments, calling them filled with Cold War mentality and a hegemonistic mindset that exposes the US practice of interference in the domestic and foreign policies of other countries. He also accused the US of polarizing international relations by forcing small and medium-sized countries to choose sides. Zhao added that in contrast, Sino-Sri Lankan relations have always been based on the principles of peaceful coexistence and friendly cooperation on the basis of consultation on an equal footing and mutual benefit. He also warned that any attempts to prevent countries from carrying out normal exchanges and cooperation through pressure and coercion will not succeed and will be rejected by history.
Safeguard hand sanitizer. නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නිරෝගිමත් දිවියකට.
Now, turning our attention to the pandemic situation, the Government Medical Officers Association warns of the number of fatalities shooting up in the days to come if correct decisions are not made immediately. Sri Lanka lost its 16th citizen to COVID-19 last evening, which is the fourth fatality of the country suffered, since the latest outbreak of the virus came to light via the Minuangoda apparel factory cluster. Though the situation looks ominous, the epidemiology unit insists that there is still no evidence of community transmissions of COVID-19 in the country.
Sri Lanka reported its 16th COVID-19 fatality yesterday, marking the third coronavirus-related death in just 4 days. According to the Department of Government Information, the victim was a 70-year-old man who was from the area of Colombo too. The victim had reportedly been admitted to the Colombo National Hospital on the 23rd of this month after he had been infected with a germ. The department stated that he died owing to medical complications arising from his underlying condition while receiving treatment at the intensive care unit of the National Hospital. The final rites of the victim was performed today in line with the stipulated health and safety protocols at the General Cemetery in Boralla.
මේ රෝගී තත්වයකින් පෙළෙන අයට සහ වියපත් අයට මේ රෝගයේ වැළඳීමෙන් සංකූලතා පැමිණීම හෝ අවසානයේදී මරණයට පත්වීමේ හැකියාව ඉතාමත්ම වැඩි බව අපිට පෙනී ගොස් තිබෙනවා. කුඩා දරුවන්ට ඒ වගේම තමා ගර්භණී මාතාවන්ට සහ පිළිකාවලට වෙන්න පුළුවන් ඉන්ද්‍රිය බද්ධ කරපු අය වෙන්න පුළුවන් ඒ හේතුන් මත ශරීරයේ ප්‍රතිශක්තිය හීන වීමට තුඩු දිය හැකි ඖෂධ භාවිතා කරන අය ඉන්නවා. මේවැනි අයව අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ආරක්ෂා කළ ගත යුතුයි. මොකද මෙවැනි අය තමා අවසානයේදී සංකූලතාවට පත් වෙලා මරණයෙන් කෙලවර වන්නේ.
In the meantime, the country recorded 280 new COVID-19 infections today. A total of 351 infections were reported from the island yesterday. Out of them, 312 were identified as persons associated with the Paliagoda fish market cluster. Among these 312, 159 are residents of Colombo. Health authorities say that from the remaining 39, 36 are persons from quarantine centres, while the other 3 are overseas returnees.
අපිට ඉතාම පැහැදිලිව පේන්න තියෙන දේ තමයි සමාජ ව්‍යාප්තියක් කියන සාධක සැලකිලිට ගත්තාම සමාජ ව්‍යාප්තියක අභියසට ලංකාව ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා කිව්වොත් නිවැරදි. සමාජ ව්‍යාප්තියක් කරා ගියොත් දැඩි සත්කාරයකවල තදබදයක් ඇති වෙනවා. මරණ සංඛ්‍යාව අසාමාන්‍ය ලෙස ඉහළ යනවා. අපි මේ අරන් තියෙන ක්‍රියාමාර්ගම නම් ගන්නේ රෝගයේ ව්‍යාප්ත වීම පාලනය කිරීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපිට යම් භයානක තැනකට තමයි යන්න වෙන්නේ. අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම අපිට ඉදිරි මාස දෙක තුල අසාමාන්‍ය ඉහළ මරණ ගාණක් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්න වෙනවා රටක් විදිහට. අපි අද දවසේ හරි තීරණ ගත්තේ නැත්තම්. අවදානම් දිස්ත්‍රික්ක පහක් අපි අඳුනගෙන තියෙනවා. කොළඹ, ගම්පහ, කළුතර ඊට අමතරව අපි ගත්තාම කෑගල්ල සහ කුරුණෑගල. නමුත් තව දිස්ත්‍රික්ක කිහිපයක දැන් අවදානම් තත්ත්වයක් මතුවෙමින් තියෙනවා. අපි කියන්නේ ඒක අවදානම් තත්ත්වයට මේ යන්නේ නැතුව ඉන්න පාලනය කරන්න නම් මේ දිස්ත්‍රික්ක පහේ අඩුම ගානේ දිස්ත්‍රික් මායින් සම්බන්ධයෙන් යම් තීරණයක් සීමා පැනවීමක් යම් සිද්ධ විය යුතුයි කියලා අපි යෝජනා කරලා තියෙනවා.
පෑලියගොඩ ප්‍රදේශයේ වාර්තා වෙච්ච අණු පොකුරත් එක්ක මේ පොකුරේ වාර්තා වුණු රෝගීන් දිවයින පුරා සියලුම ප්‍රදේශවලින් මේ වෙද්දි වාර්තා වෙමින් තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම තවදුරටත් ලංකාවේ අපිට මූලාශ්‍ර සොයාගත නොහැකි රෝගීන් කීප දෙනෙකුත් මේ වෙද්දි වාර්තා වෙමින් තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා මේ තත්ත්වය ඉතාම භයානකයි. ඒ වගේම කොළඹ මහනගර සභා සීමාවේ ඇතැම් ප්‍රදේශ මේ වෙද්දී මහජන සෞඛ්‍ය පරීක්ෂකවරුන් ඇතුළු සෞඛ්‍ය පාලනයෙන් ගිලිහෙමින් තියෙනවා. ඒක රැක ගැනීම සඳහා දැඩි පරිශ්‍රමයක නිරත වෙමින් ඉන්නවා මහජන සෞඛ්‍ය පරීක්ෂකවරු සහ ආරක්ෂක ඒකාබද්ධව.
However, the epidemiology unit reassures the public that there are no community transmissions of the virus yet.
And yesterday we have identified 351 cases, and out of them 348 are related to Minuwangoda and Paliyagoda clusters, and the balance are those who are in quarantine centers after returning from overseas. So with that we can say that this disease spread is at a cluster level, and there is no evidence that the community transmission is established in our country.
In another development, State Minister of Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals, Professor Channa Jayasumana, said today that a modified version of an Ayurvedic drug syrup will be administered to COVID-19 patients as part of a preliminary study.
Preparation which was used in the Ayurvedic medicine over a long time is modified and introduced to give to corona patients, COVID-19 patients. And we had the initial discussion with Minister Sisira Jayakodi on the topic, and we agreed to give the particular modified Sudarsana syrup to COVID-19 patients as a preliminary study. It will be held in Borella Ayurvedic Hospital and certain other places, and hope we will able to introduce this particular Ayurvedic treatment to whole country within a short period of time.
Meanwhile, the epidemiology unit listed some areas which are at high risk from COVID-19. Nugegoda, Batramulla, Kolonnava, Kahatuduwa, Moratuwa and Kudavella, which come under the Colombo municipality, are at high risk. The areas of Ragama, Minuwangoda, Vattala, Divulapitiya, Jayala, Ekala, Katana, Siduwa, Gampaha, Attanagalla, Veyangoda, Kalaniya, Mahara, Dompe, Pugoda, Mirigama, Biyagama, Nigambo and Katunayaka in the Gampaha district are also identified as high-risk zones. Meanwhile, in the Kaluthara district, the areas of Matugama and Wadduwa are also at high risk.
අද පටන් ලබා දී ඇති උපදෙස් වලට අනුව කොවිඩ් ආසාදිත වෙන පුද්ගලයා රෝහල් වෙත රැගෙන ගියත් ඔවුන්ගේ ප්‍රථම ආශ්‍රිතයන් නිවෙස්වල නිවෙස් නිරෝධායනකට ලක් කිරීමට කටයුතු කරනු ලබනවා. මෙසේ නිවෙස් නිරෝධායන ලක් කරලා අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ ඔවුන් අසල්වාසීන්ට පොදුවේ රටේ අනිකුත් ජනතාවට සෞඛ්‍ය තර්ජනයක් ඉදිරිපත් වන ආකාරයෙන්
In the meantime, 7 children and 3 mothers at the Lady Ridgeway Hospital for Children in Borella were confirmed with the COVID-19 virus today. The Director General of the hospital stated that they are associated with the Paliyagoda Fish Market cluster. In another development, 10 persons of the Welfare Division of the Police Special Task Force who visited the Paliyagoda Fish Market have been diagnosed as COVID-19 patients. They were identified as personnel attached to the Kalaniya, Kalubovila and Rajagiri STF camps who are undergoing quarantine. As a result, measures were taken to subject all persons in 3 camps for PCR tests. Elsewhere, after a fishmonger from the area of Ambuldeniya in Gilimale of Ratnapura tested positive for COVID-19, his family members were also subjected to PCR tests. The PCR test results revealed that 3 family members had contracted the virus. Health authorities say that the fishmonger in question had sold fish in the area of Gilimale after purchasing them from the Paliyagoda fish market. Accordingly, 40 of his close contacts were directed to undergo self-quarantine, while investigations are being conducted to identify persons who had purchased fish from him. In another development, 10 persons in the areas of Kaluthara North and South were confirmed with COVID-19 last night. Health officials say that they are associated with the Paliyagoda fish market cluster. Meanwhile, 7 fishmongers residing in the area of Dehiovita and one of their spouses were confirmed with the virus. They too are associated with the Paliyagoda fish market cluster. As such, the Dehiovita Medical Officer of Health said that the Grama-Niladhara divisions of Dehiovita, Ihala and Pahala Talduwa, Apalapitiya and Timiripola are designated as isolated areas until further notice. In the meantime, a fishmonger in the area of Jayavardhan Estate in Kahatuda was also diagnosed COVID-19. Health officials say that he had attended his son's wedding last night. Accordingly, the public health inspectors of Hadigama, Kasbeva and Kahatuduwa went to the hotel in the area of Piliyandala, accompanied by the police, where the wedding ceremony was held. Health officials said that an officer of the army present at the event interfered and prevented health officials and the police from performing their duties, during which the fishmonger in question attempted to flee. The fishmonger had reportedly visited several houses in the area of Kahatuduwa to distribute his son's wedding invitations. Ultimately, he was hospitalized. Health officials said that legal action will be taken against him. In another development, after a COVID-19 infected person had entered the Mount Lavinia Magistrates Court, measures were taken to temporarily close the court premises. Accordingly, all hearings that were scheduled for today were postponed to the 23rd of November.
We will see you shortly after this break. Bear with us.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, pharmacies and stores selling essential food items in the Gampaha district was open today for the public to restock their essential goods. The entire district had been under quarantine curfew since last Wednesday. However, the window of free movement is only 14 hours, ending at 10 p.m. in around 40 minutes. Meanwhile, several government departments too suspended their services temporarily as precautionary measures to arrest the possible spread of COVID-19.
The National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 announced yesterday that the curfew in Gampaha district, which was imposed last Wednesday, will remain until further notice. With that being the case, essential food item outlets and pharmacies in the curfew-imposed Gampaha district opened this morning, providing a window of 14 hours from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. for the public to replenish their essential goods. Large queues were noticed at shops and pharmacies, with most people adhering to safety protocols. Despite repeated advice and warnings from the health and law enforcement authorities, as well as the government, it was clearly evident that some people still haven't grasped the true magnitude of the danger this virus poses. In the meantime, both the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal have decided to cancel court hearings that were scheduled for this week. Releasing a statement, the Registrar of the Supreme Court, Pradeep Mahamutugala, stated that steps will be taken to issue new dates for the cancelled hearings. Meanwhile, the State Minister of Vehicle Regulation, Bus Transport Services and Train Compartments and Motorcar Industry, Dilum Amunugama, said that the officers of the Department of Motor Traffic in Narayanpeta and Verhera, as well as the National Transport Medical Institute, will be closed until further notice. State Minister Amunugama added that all long-distance buses heading to Colombo will also be suspended until further notice. The decision was taken due to the curfew being imposed in several police areas in Colombo. However, the Lanka Private Bus Owners Association requested the authorities and banks to give a moratorium on their charges for 6 months, saying that the move will protect the industry from the ongoing COVID-19 situation. In another development, Deputy Secretary General of the Parliament, Neil Idawala, said that the Parliament will be closed for members today and tomorrow. He added that Parliament will be disinfected during these 2 days. A sub-inspector of police at the Parliamentary Intelligence Unit tested positive for the virus recently. In the meantime, several curfew-hit areas in Colombo were disinfected during the day in a joint effort by the police and the Ceylon Petroleum Storage Terminals. The disinfected locations included the Manning Market in Peta, the Gunasingapura bus stand and the bus stand on Bastion Mawata. Elsewhere, the Hatton bus stand too was also disinfected during the day. In another development, steps were taken by the police to transport people stranded at the Colombo fort owing to the curfew to return to their homes. Meanwhile, in Berwala, a tense situation erupted near the entrance of the fishing harbour when vessel owners attempted to enter the harbour to clear their catch of almost 500,000 kilograms. But the Chief Public Health Inspector of Berwala denied them access to the harbour, saying that the vessel owners will have to wait until the results of PCR tests done on associates of confirmed COVID-19 patients at the harbour recently are received. Steps were however taken by the police to disperse the crowd without incident. In this backdrop, State Minister of Fisheries Harbour Development Kanchana Wijesekara stated that all fisheries harbours closed due to the spread of COVID-19 will be reopened for operation as per the health and safety guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health. In the meantime, the Coconut Cultivation Board warned people to adhere to social distancing during a program that was worked off in Gaul to provide the public with coconuts at a concessionary price.
We will see you shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority announces that it has introduced a single application process for tourism sector investors that has now reduced the waiting period from 45 days previously to 25. This was done after mapping out and removing approval process duplications investors had to face when dealing with multiple government agencies. The SLTDA says that the new 25-day process will be cut further when the system is migrated to an online system soon.
The Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority has announced that it has streamlined its project approval process for investments in the tourism industry by establishing a centralized investment facilitation arm. The authority says that the key objective of the effort is to offer a single point of contact for tourism investors and give them an efficient, effective and hassle-free investment process. The SLTDA says that it identified serious stumbling blocks in the previous systems where investors were required to fill out multiple individual applications for several line agencies to receive approval. In addition, the number of agencies investors were forced to deal with increased depending on whether the project was located close to a sensitive Sri Lankan attraction. The SLTDA says that in addition to incurring costs to investors, such a complex and time-consuming process also paved the way to third-party involvement, leading to corruption. It added that interagency collaboration was further strengthened through continuous dialogue, which resulted in the preparation of a single common application for tourism investments. In addition, the approval processes of key approving agencies were mapped to spot the duplications and delays due to unnecessary steps and multiple signatories. The process was thereby streamlined, and as a result, the time taken to issue a preliminary clearance has now reduced from 45 days to 25 days. It added that approval times could see a further reduction in the near future, with plans to automate the entire process and enable online application submissions, inclusive of a progress tracking facility. This will entail the connecting of all project approving agencies and utility agencies within an integrated system.
Now, the Colombo Stock Exchange and market intermediaries today operated completely based on remote functionality. The move was driven by its offices and those of several market intermediary firms being located in areas subject to quarantine curfew. In a statement, the CSE said that the following digitization of the CSE preparatory exercises were carried out as part of a regular business continuity process along with stockbroker firms to ensure the ability to conduct market operations remotely. It added that the CSE and stockbrokers firms are satisfied with the outcome of the business community process exercises, which is a clear indication of the robustness of the CSE's system and its ability to continue uninterrupted stock market operations. The CSE also notes that its team follow a process of contingency planning and are geared to ensure that all functions can be performed in the event of any unforeseen circumstances. The successful remote functionality of today's trading is a clear indication that, as an industry, the business continuity process of the stock market is dynamic and stakeholders could expect uninterrupted functionality and operation of the stock market. Now, Sri Lankan shares closed lower today, dragged down by losses in industrial, financial and consumer staples stocks. The benchmark all-share price index ended down 1.73% to end at 5,669.33 points, while the S&P SL index of more liquid stocks experienced a similar fall of 39.54 points to end at 2,258.34. Now, here's a brief report on today's market performance.
Today the market fell again for the second consecutive day amidst the significant escalation in the number of COVID-19 active cases. The ASPI dropped to 5,669 points at the close of day today. The overall index fall was mainly led by the blue chip counters. Retail sector of the investors seemed to be a bit of panic as most investors were on the selling side. High net worth and institutional players were rather inactive during the day, while we saw a bit of bargain hunters come into play at the start of the day when the index started off with a negative 100 decline. However, foreigners had very low participation with only about 8% market participation. The outflow was also a minimum level of minus 19 million rupees. Overall market activity also declined during the day as the turnover was only $1 billion, which is significantly lower compared to the previous number of trading sessions.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.